Hey everyone, and welcome. We are so excited to dive into more about mental fitness and what that means. You might have joined us the last time when we talked with Richard. We talked about mental composition. Today, we're able to talk with Sandhya, our head of well being, and she's going to talk to us about mental flexibility, how it works, and what it is, and all that kind of stuff. So, we're really excited to have her. And Sandhya, we're just going to jump right in. So, can you tell me about mental flexibility? What is that?
Yes. Well, John, thank you for having me. And I'm excited to be here and to talk about the topic of mental flexibility. Like mental composition, it's one of the domains of mental fitness. And the way that I like to talk about mental flexibility, which of course is a term that feels new probably to most people,
Yeah.
but what some people are more familiar with this idea of physical flexibility. And when you think of physical flexibility, you think of your range of motion, how we bend, we twist, we reach for things. And you can think of our mental fitness the same way. It's the range of motion for our inner self. So it's when how we deal with life stretches, right? Because life does stretch us constantly and demands so much of us. So just like in life's physical demands, where, when that thing happens to roll under the bed and you have to reach awkwardly to go reach and find it and get it. You're stretching your body and you can either get stuck and hurt because you're not flexible enough, or you could reach easily and go grab the object. The same thing with life. Life stretches us constantly, and how we adjust to plans that don't happen the way that we expect when life throws us those curveballs and those obstacles that we inevitably face. So it's how we as human beings journey in life through the realities of those situations.
Yeah, I love that, and I love the picture you gave of reaching under the bed. I've had those moments. I'm 41 now, of when you reach for something and it grabs, and you're like, oh, can't do that. Or even when you wake up in the morning, you feel those aches and have to do those stretches to get yourself in a better shape, I guess, as you
Yeah.
move forward. So I love that picture. So we talk about mental flexibility. You just gave us the definition. What does that feel like in day to day life? And why do you think people underestimate the importance of this specific skill?
Well, I can give you an example. So this morning, I am driving to work and want to get here a little bit early because I want to prepare for this podcast. So I'm driving, and what happens? A school bus happens to turn right in front of me. So now I'm stuck behind the school bus that stops every 100 feet to pick up another child. I'm like, okay, it's a school bus. I think I know where it's going to turn. I have a little bit of, no, maybe 10 more minutes of this in a slow pace. I can get to work. But then what happens is then a garbage truck happens to come in front of the school bus. So now I'm stuck behind a garbage truck and a school bus. And what rises off in front of me? I am frustrated. I am getting irritated. And I had to take a moment to think about, okay, all right, what am I trying to do? I want to get to work because I want to prepare for this podcast. So mental flexibility required me to first be aware that I was feeling these emotions of anger and frustration, but I need to get in this rush. And I could have chose to steep in it because I'm upset and I have a right to be upset and that's okay. But also at the same time to think of it something differently. Okay, I'm probably going to get to work 10 minutes later. So what does that mean? All right, that means maybe I can't spend 10 minutes getting my coffee. Maybe it'll be a 5-minute coffee break, and it gives me more time to prepare. So it's those little small things that we do that we have to adjust to because I could not predict the school bus is going to come in front of me or a garbage truck will come in front of that school bus. But also it's the bigger things in life. It's, we often hear with our members at Forte, they're in a season of life where their kids have left the home, they're empty nesters, and they're excited for now all this free time that they have. And they have all these plans and things that they want to do. But then their elderly parent gets sick. So those plans then have to get adjusted. All the trips that they want to take, the vacations they want to go on, the freedom that they thought they had, suddenly that picture looks a little different. That story looks a little different. So what does that mean now? To still have those dreams and keep those dreams, but still be taking care of an older parent at the same time. So it's It's those unexpected things that happen that we feel like we're prepared for, but in the times we feel rushed and we are our pace of life is so fast, we often go into automatic mode versus intentional mode. And I think that's where we underestimate our ability to flex, oftentimes in this high emotion state that we experience.
So I think on the opposite side of that, you can also look at people who have young children at all. You talk about empty nesters. And I often catch myself in the moment when I'm frustrated with my own kids to remember, like, I'm not always going to have this time. And to be flexible, like to change my mindset in the moment, I think is a part of mental flexibility too, of like, rather than getting frustrated that my 4-year-old isn't ready or is struggling again with going to preschool, even though he's gone for a full semester, I can't get frustrated. I need to take a step back and be like, this is the last opportunity I have to take a kid to preschool. So I think you're right. It is the kind of like this mental shift to be able to go from this is where I'm at. I need to understand where I'm at and shift into something else.
Now, yeah, I like to think of it as that, there's two different um, I'll just say it's two P's, right? It's the perspective that our ability to shift perspectives and be able to change our perspective based on the situation, what we're dealing with, but also to think of other pathways, right? So there's more than just way. It's not first it begins with becoming aware of what we're feeling and to ask ourselves what else is true, and then think of what is possible in going in that pathway, knowing that there are obstacles and things of life that happen. So, but to have that perspective and pathway have to be rooted in something. And you mentioned something I can tell by what you just said is that family is important to you. Time with family is important to you. So I would say maybe that's a value that you have, right? Family time. So what your perspective had to lean back on is your value of family time. And that allowed you to change how you thought about that situation from frustration with your children to, okay, I'm frustrated right now, but gosh, I have this time with my family and I
Yeah.
appreciate that.
Yeah. Yeah. And you talked about earlier about this idea of physical fitness too. And it's just making me think it, transitioning to our next question. When you have a muscle that's locked up, what do? You stretch it out. And sometimes we can become really rigid in how we do life. And that's what's actually hurting us is that we're not stretching ourselves or looking at that thing that's so locked in place that could be hurting our mental fitness. So, how does mental flexibility unlock in someone? And what becomes possible when that pillar that we call these pillars in mental fitness is strong and we're able to stretch out that thing that's been locked up for so long?
That actually reminds me of what a psychologist, Daniel Siegel, calls the river of well-being. So this is imagine yourself, you're on a boat, you're on a river, and you're steering the boat, right? And there's also the currents that are coming. So you're steering, and there are the currents. And the way to think about that is just stepping back a little bit. Another core aspect of mental flexibility is recognizing that we do have agency, but also at the same time that we have limitations, right? We are human beings who have will and ability to be able to adjust things and change things and move things around, but at the same time we're limited. We're
Mhm.
physically limited, and also we're limited because we cannot control everything around us. So
Yep.
imagining the boat, you have agency, right? You're steering, but also there's the currents. The currents you can't control, but you're doing your best as you're going through this river. And on one side, Daniel Siegel calls it the bank of rigidity, right? It's when things are getting so stress is building up. Things are feeling out of a little bit out of your control, and you can clench, right? You can go into overdrive and want to hold everything, and you feel more like you have to move in a certain direction with your fist clenched. Or there's the other side, the bank of chaos, which is where you feel maybe helpless or hopeless. I can't do anything about the situation. It didn't work out the way I expected. And how do we stay, and having mental flexibility is staying within that river without hitting either side, right? to be in that state where
Yeah.
we can adjust, that as the currents come, as the tide comes, that we're still could steer despite the obstacles and despite those twists and turns are inevitable.
Yeah, I love that. It's such a great picture. And personally, for me, actually, in a recent social post, I talked about for me, when I get overwhelmed or when I feel pressure, what's great for me is to go for a walk. And we have a river walk, ironically enough, right down the street from us. And I love to hear the sound of the river. There's something calming about that. But it also is a reminder I have no control over that river. I
So,
can't go over there and gain control, but I can gain perspective by
yeah.
finding peace and being relaxed and stretching myself in a new way. So, what do you think changes first when people begin to develop this skill of flexibility? And let me go a little bit deeper. We talk a lot about going from drift to drive. And it's, again, great that you're talking about being on a river, being on a boat, when you're not steering, when you're not paddling, when you're doing life, you feel like you're drifting stone. Like I have this destination that I want to get to, but all of these things are taking me everywhere else. So we call that drift, where we're not able to drive towards our destination, be where we want to be. How do we develop that skill and how does it help us shift from drift to drive?
Yeah. So, going back to that river metaphor, right? We're on that river, and if you're not really steering, you're just letting the boat drift in
Mhm.
the direction that it's going in.
Yep.
So it's you going along with the tide, and that's not what flexibility is. First of all, and and I might be jumping ahead a little bit, but there's some misconception that flexibility is that you have no anchor, that you just go where the direction where, you know, the most popular choice or the easy path maybe. But that's not what flexibility means. Because flexibility, as I mentioned earlier, requires an anchor. And that anchor are things like our values, our sense of meaning, our purpose, where faith comes from. So that is a really important part of flexibility that we can't take away from. So we always do have an anchor. Just imagine a ship, right? A ship has an anchor, but the tide still comes. So it's going to move a little bit, but it's still anchored in something.
Yep.
But if it was so rigid, it would break. It
Hmm.
wouldn't. But because of its ability to shift, that it's able to stay there anchored.
Yeah.
There's actually this great fable about the oak tree and the reed. Amongst that big oak tree are these reeds, these skinny reeds, short, skinny reeds. And the oak tree is laughing at the reeds. Oh, look at you. As the wind is blowing a little bit, you guys are just bending with it. Look at me. I'm so strong. I can stand here and nothing is moving me. But then suddenly a really strong wind comes. And what happens is that that oak tree, because it's so stiff and rigid, it falls over. But then those reeds are able to bow and just move with the wind instead of breaking. So what happens eventually is that that oak tree is fallen and broken on top of these reeds that had withstood the wind. So it's really reminding ourselves that we are anchored in something, but our ability to still drive towards a certain direction requires us to know what direction we're going in, right?
Yeah.
We can flex. Maybe the path might look a little different. We got to allow ourselves to be okay with the path not looking the way that we think it's going to look and the way that we expect it to look. But still, we can drive towards it as that direction, that purpose, that value, those meanings, who we're becoming. So really holding both those at the same time is
Mhm.
necessary to go to not to drift, but to really go towards drive.
Yeah, I love that. It's such a great picture of what that means and the idea of even nature, how it does that naturally. And it's funny because our backyard in our house is surrounded by trees. We only have one tree in our backyard, but all of our neighbors' trees are old and branches fall down all the time and break our fence. And then we have our one tree in the middle. That's fine. And it's not an issue. But you can be surrounded by people in life too that are rigid, that are not able to flex. And sometimes flexibility might be making the hard choice of that's not a good influence for me. And I have my foundation, what I'm rooted in, the things that I believe in, my values, and these things around me are not aligned with that. So we also need to be flexible enough to say, I need to remove some of these things from my life. And sometimes that takes outside perspective. It takes the help of a conversation from somebody else, a Forte coach or a friend, a personal confidant who can point those things out and say, this is your value. This is what you're driving towards. But these things around you aren't helping. And I'm
Mhm.
curious to you, what other things you talked about some of the maybe the misconceptions, misunderstandings of mental flexibility. What other things do people tend to get wrong about mental flexibility?
Yeah, so I would say the primary is what I mentioned, which is the idea that it means being wishy-washy, that you just
Yeah.
go with the direction that that everyone else is going in, and you're not anchored in anything. But also, yeah, you don't go in it alone. I really like what you just mentioned right there, that flexibility requires us to um, adjust in relationship in the context of community because we are not isolated beings. How we shift and change does affect those around us, and how we are able to view what we are flexing towards is and away from impacts, whether we're in our family, in our teams, in our communities. So it's not something that is a I'm doing it by myself. As in everything in mental fitness, it's done in a relationship with others. Um, so having a trusted person to even ask you, when do you feel that I am um, feeling overtight or over controlled in a situation, so that they can call that out into your life. I think that's always important. Part of the idea in being in relationship with other people is that oftentimes the most flexibility that's required is when we're dealing with other people.
Mm,
I feel like there's the least control we have
yeah.
is often with other people and our relationships with them. And that's where we can also feel the most pain and hurt. So, to allow ourselves, I think mental flexibility when it comes to relationships is probably one of the most important things that we can work on, is not allow ourselves to let our assumptions about someone, what they're saying to us, to be what we think is true, but ask what else could be true. Um, what other situation could be affecting this conversation? And it doesn't mean that we excuse someone who may have been rude to us, but gives us a momentary pause to be like, okay, is it because of something I said or did? Or is it because of something they're dealing with or something they're coming out of that felt intense? So I think flexibility in relationship is something that is really important. It's not done in isolation. And also the fact that it is really anchored in something, and where you are anchored from allows us to flex more intentionally towards our goals and who we're trying to become.
Yeah, and I love something that you just hit on too, because I think that kind of leads into what we're going to talk about next of how to train mental flexibility, the practical, doable reps that we can do. One thing that you said though was to see the perspective of the other person. And I think that that's a huge part of flexibility. Like I was even thinking when you were talking about your drive to work, the bus driver who cut you off, and then the other person who cut you off. So often we're caught up in our own, well, I got to get to work. I got to do this thing. Well, did the bus driver miss you pulling out because he had 30 kids behind him screaming? Did the
Mhm.
guy who was trying to get to work too miss it because he's working on a deadline? Like road rage is a real thing, but a lot of that's because you're focused on yourself and in your situation. But if you can stop for a moment, be flexible and say, what's going on in their life? That's a rep in a sense, because you're taking a moment to shift the perspective, to be flexible and understand someone else. So what are other practical doable reps and how do we train mental flexibility?
Yeah, I mean, what you mentioned just right there is the perspective shift, right? That was a zoom in. Our zooming in is when we think about ourselves, our situations, our circumstances, how it affected us. And flexibility requires us to zoom out. And that's think of the broader picture. Okay, what else is part of this story? Because I'm not the single character in this story. There are
Yeah.
so many other characters and players. So to zoom out, I think flexibility is that learning to do that is a skill that we can cultivate in our lives. It is not to always have this narrow perspective to zoom out, but that requires us to ask a lot of questions. So I feel like in anything, flexibility is something that is going to require conscious intention, right? We set aside time in our workout to stretch so that our physical day, the physical activities that we do, feel more easy. And
Uh-huh.
flexibility does require a lot of intentionality and cognitive demand initially, that hopefully that, but as you cultivate it, it becomes more easy part of who you are in your nature. So, one way to practice mental flexibility, life will make you flex regardless. So, you're
Right.
either practicing mental flexibility or you're not in life.
Yeah.
So, we can't avoid that. But a way that we can be a little bit more proactive and a more practical tip is to practice the kind of I'll call before and after, right? You can think of maybe something that happened in your day earlier, or maybe in your week earlier, where you can say, okay, how could I have handled the situation differently? I did this, but maybe if I did this instead, it would have turned out a little differently. Or I could have reacted a little differently to the situation. So, kind of a look back and reflection of thinking through things that have already happened. But I really want to be cautious in that, to say that it's not a moment to beat yourself up about all the bad things that you did, but to
Yeah.
really think of that as like a learning and a growth mindset of like, okay, oh, X happened, and maybe I could have done Y instead, or I could have done this instead, so Y would have happened, to really view that as a learning opportunity. And then also there's the what comes after. So think through something that's ahead in your day or in your week, and think about, okay, I know this is planned and I hope it goes great. I hope it goes well. But what's the purpose behind this? Say it's like family vacation. You're on going on a family vacation next week to the beach, and you're really excited for it. You want family time and everyone's looking forward to it. And then something happens. The flight gets canceled.
Mm.
The weather doesn't cooperate. But what was the purpose behind that?
Yeah.
The purpose behind that time was to spend time with quality time with your family and to get some rest. So if you focus on that purpose behind it, there's always another way to still get to that outcome. It might not be the way that you think about it. And rather, when you look ahead, what helps us, it's okay to be upset. And it's not to say don't be upset, be positive all the time. And I don't want that to be the message. Be upset, be disappointed. You spend time and money, resources to do that. But what was the purpose behind it? It was family time and rest. Is there another way that I can get that? And reminding ourselves even early on about those values and purpose and those anchors that are really most important.
It's making me think back to physical fitness again. There are those who really enjoy bodybuilding and they are very strong. And if they walk around like this, they're big men and women who enjoy the bulk, the strength training, but they can't bend over to tie their shoes,
Mm,
because they have so much muscle, so much girth. And there are some people who enjoy structure, rigidity, strength.
mm.
So, what's a gentle entry point into training flexibility for those people who are like, I have to have everything rigid and structured, and I can't be flexible because that's not who I am? What's a
Yeah.
gentle entry point there?
Well, I have to say, oftentimes those people who are so strong and can't do that, you have to be
Yeah,
careful, because what you do is that you end up hurting or straining yourself in a way that then makes you not able to do what you intended. What was the intention behind that strength? To be healthy, maybe to look a certain way. But if you injure yourself, then you lose your ability to do those things, or it takes you longer to get back to that. So, but I understand. I understand the sense of needing routine, needing a schedule, needing some sort of, certainty. We're wired for that. And when we don't get it, we go into this like fight or flight anxiety mode. So it does require us to remind ourselves once again that we are people of agency, and that things are not hopeless, but also real limited. So what can we adjust? What can we not adjust? And be okay with what we can and what we cannot. So for those people who want a little bit more, you know, control is to do those little practices. Okay. I'm going to look at my calendar. Oftentimes people who are that structured have a plan. They know what's going to be happening in their tomorrow in their schedule and do that same practice. Okay. These are the things that I have ahead of me for the next day. Um, what is the purpose behind these meetings, these activities? Okay. What would it look like? If I could accomplish, you know, 2 or 3 of these things, sometimes knowing that all 10 can happen. What are 2 or 3 things that I accomplished? I feel like, oh, wow, this was worth it. These are the 2 or 3 most important things. So that you have a little bit room and flexibility, that you're not beating yourself up. I think get to that because we're people of limits. What I mean? I will have a to-do list of like 50 things. The reality is I can only get to 10 of them. And I will feel bad about all the other 40 I didn't do. But if I tell myself, you know what, if I do these 3 things, that's a win for me today. So having that perspective that as you plan to think about what is the goal, what is a real win if I accomplish that, and is this leading to my purpose, my values, and my becoming?
Yeah, that's super practical. And I think it also ties into what we're shifting to next is for leaders, specifically leadership. How does someone become mentally flexible and show up in leadership? What does a flexible leader make possible for their organization, for their household? How does that work for leadership?
Yeah, I mean, I imagine more so because with leadership comes influence and a responsibility, right? You're leading individuals and people. And, individuals or people are the most messiest, unpredictable things that we have. And organizations are made up of those people and those decisions that those people make. And, things that we can't control out of the business that come and infiltrate, decision making. And it's the same application that we have in life and in work that leaders can apply. Is the idea that to be able to ask questions, to not make assumptions, to see the story when you're reacting to an employee that maybe didn't do what you expect or did something hurtful to the company, the organization, is to not make assumptions, to ask with curiosity, what is the story? So then you can make a better decision based on that. When something unexpected happens, outside of the organization that impacts revenue or the quarterly goals that you have or the yearly goals, and now you have to shift and think of a different way to do
Mm,
it. That requires flexibility and thinking, okay, the path was to hit this, maybe this revenue target. The
mhm.
goal was to hit this. The path might look a little different now because now this obstacle
Yep.
came in the way. So what are alternative paths? So I would say with leadership especially, flexibility is so important in how we lead people and how we still, because the leader is in charge of the vision, moving the company forward toward that vision. And that vision hopefully will still stay the same, but the pathway is going to look different. And the leader has to be able to adjust to the alternate pathways when needed.
Yeah. It's interesting because we're in the middle of conversations like that at Forte about where we're heading and what we're doing. And last week we were given kind of here's our goals, and then this week our boss came in and was like, actually here's our goal, and it shifted. So it goes from leadership to the people working within the org too. And I'm curious, I'm gonna maybe throw a wrench in the system here a little bit for the next question. Real life person right here. If you're
Mhm.
my Forte coach, if you're my confidant, whatever it is, what is a guided reflection you could do with me right now to help me be mentally flexible? So let's say I'm a Forte employee and my new mandate is to reach 1 million people over the next year. That's not my goal, but and all of a sudden, I'm like, well, I've never had to do that before. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I need to find marketing qualified leads. I've never heard that term before. What does that mean? How am I supposed? And I start to escalate and escalate. What's something as a regular human being I could do right now to help with my mental flexibility?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's a big one, right? You're
Yeah.
asking. So let me see. You're asking whether how knowing I have this huge goal ahead of me and it feels so big how do I reach that goal in a way that's sustainable and that's you're able to, right? If you have the ability, the confidence that you can reach that goal, and flexibility is a key in that because if you think there's only, first of all, one way to reach that goal, that would make it feel like, oh, there's only one path. I have to have that one path, right? So I would ask you, what does that goal mean to you first? What does
Mhm.
reaching that 1 million people mean to you?
Broader reach, more awareness of mental fitness and Forte. It would mean a lot to us as a business because we would have a foothold on this market of mental fitness, which is a newer thing. So it would mean a lot because it would broaden the horizon of who we can reach and what we can do to impact people and change lives.
So reaching 1 million people is one more million people that you can impact and transform their lives.
Yeah.
Mm. So this 1 million is more than just more than just a number. This is 1 million people that you're impacting. So knowing that your goal is to impact and change people's lives, how does that change how you're thinking about that 1 million number?
Yeah, it kind of puts it in more of a perspective of one person at a time. Like instead of a million, it's I just changed one life because we had 500 views on this video, or we're doing a podcast right now, and people are going to understand flexibility better. So we're impacting the 1,000+ people now that are going to watch this video. It puts it more in flexibility terms, one person at a time, rather than the great number of a million.
Hmm. So it helped you, I would say, shift your perspective a little bit to thinking of that 1 million number, not as a big number, but as individual people who you get to impact, and that you have the ability by the decisions that you make, the content that you put out, that you're doing it one person, maybe sometimes 10, and maybe sometimes 100 at a time. You're getting towards that goal, and it feels hopefully doable. Yeah.
That's great. I love that we just did that, kind of walked through the process. And I also loved how you just kind of calmed everything down. You took that escalation that I was talking about and you calmed it down, had me take a step back, get perspective, and shift that. And I hope that people caught onto that as well, because that's exactly what we do, our coaches do at Forte is help people step back and reflect and see what's going on. And I am curious as we start to wrap up, what do you hope people feel or realize as they strengthen their mental flexibility? What's your hope for people with that?
I really hope that as they're working on their flexibility, they're actually getting more rooted in the things that feel most important to them.
Mm.
The things that I mentioned earlier, their values, their purpose, their meaning. Because while you're practicing flexibility, you have to keep revisiting those things.
Mhm.
So as we keep revisiting them and become bringing more awareness to them, we feel either more convicted about them, or sometimes it may shift. Maybe I think, thought this was important to me. But I
Mhm.
realize now that this is actually something that is really valuable to those I love and how I want to lead and live my life. So, what I really hope is that as you are moving and adjusting and navigating to life's twists and turns and obstacles, you're being anchored and rooted in something more deep, and that is really who you're becoming and who you are to other people.
Mhm.
So I really hope that's what people get out of mental flexibility is as they're practicing it in real life or in using those tools when they're looking at their days before or after, but it's a constant reminder of what's most important, and they live into
Yeah,
that.
I love that. Thank you so much for this conversation. I think it's been great for me to learn, and I'm sure that people who are listening are learning as well. If you want to learn more about what mental fitness is, we really encourage you to check out Forte. You can go to getforte.com and look at our website and ask questions. Feel free to reach out to us and on our socials and send us messages. We want to have conversations with you about mental fitness and how you can be a part of this and grow stronger, but also more flexible. And just a reminder that mental flexibility is about expanding what's possible. You're rooted in what that is, but you're also able to stretch yourself to new limits. It's not becoming someone else, but it's becoming more fully yourself. And we've been talking a lot about that at Forte, that you're not broken, you're becoming. You're moving towards something. And we want to invite you again to explore our platform, our socials, everything, and get involved so that you can grow stronger. That's our hope. That's what we want for people, is to grow stronger in their mental fitness. So again, thank you, Sandia, for your time. We appreciate it. And we look forward to the next time where we're going to be able to discuss some more. Thanks, everybody.
Absolutely. Thank you.